module is actually one of my favorite modules. Food is medicine or food is poison. The more I learn about how to optimize brain function, the more I realize it really does start with food. So in this module, we're going to talk about brain healthy nutrition. We're going to talk about the kind of calories you eat, how important water is, healthy, clean protein, smart carbs, healthy fat, concept I like called eat from the rainbow, brain healthy herbs and spices. You'll actually begin to think of spice aisle like the pharmacy. Even in the supplements we have, there are a number of spices. We're going to talk about why clean food. What does that mean? And food allergies. Our best testimonials at Amen Clinics come from elimination diets. We'll talk about using food to heal your mind, specifically what foods can boost things like serotonin, dopamine, GABA, and acetylcholine. We'll look at type-specific. Throughout this whole program, we've been looking at know your type, what type of brain do you have? Well, that even matters when it comes to food. And then I'm going to give you some really practical tips. So the typical Western diet, think of bad fat, salt, and sugar. Cheeseburgers, fries, and sodas have been associated in large-scale studies with depression, dementia, ADHD, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and obesity. That diet promotes inflammation. In a study from Australia, the Western dietary pattern is clearly associated with ADHD. The typical Western diet consists of only 15 foods. An overabundance of bad fat, salt, and sugar. There's a jingle from McDonald's where they talk about the Big Mac. And it actually contains like 13 of the most common 15 Western diet foods. So beef patty, lettuce, tomato, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. That actually counts as 2 if you count the sesame seeds. Mustard, mayo, ketchup, French fries, and a giant-sized cola. So you get 13 of the most common 15 foods, and for many, a full day's supply of fat, salt, and calories. Isn't that interesting? We have a high school course. We talk about brain healthy nutrition. And what we do is we have the kids get online and figure out the calories, fat, salt in their favorite fast food meals. And it's horrifying for them because they realize that they're eating 2/3 of their calories at one meal. And no one's ever taught them about that. Isn't that just a little bit nuts? I like Paul Simon's song Kodachrome. It starts with when I think back on all the crap I learned in high school. It's a wonder I can think at all. I love this slide. If you had $1 million racehorse, would you ever feed it junk food? Only if you were an idiot or you didn't like the horse. But people feed themselves such crap. You have to wonder about their sense of self-care, self-love. So eating well is about abundance, not deprivation. It's such an important mindset. Often when I'm at lectures, people ask me, what's the one thing I should do to get healthy? And my first response is the one thing you should do is stop being stupid and do them all. But then when I really back up, and people often need an anchor, and the one thing to do is to change your mind. It's your mindset that people think, oh, I'll have to give up this and that and this and that. And it's really not about giving up anything except sickness. That when you make the right decisions, you feel better. Your energy's better, your focus is better, you're saving your mind. And you don't have to give up taste because the high combinations of fat, sugar, and salt actually deaden your taste buds. And you need more and more of that in order to get any feeling at all. In fact, people that are overweight, they found that it numbs their nucleus accumbens. So the nucleus accumbens, that part of your brain that responds to dopamine. People who are overweight or obese actually have less activity there. And so it's like they need more of the bad food in order to taste anything at all, or in order to feel normal. And so there's a lot of research recently on how these kinds of foods are clearly addictive. So, rule number one, think high quality calories in and high quality energy out. So, calories count. There are going to be all sorts of programs that you hear go, oh, you don't have to worry about calories. And I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I just think that's totally stupid. There's a very interesting study from the University of Wisconsin where they let one group of rhesus monkeys eat anything they wanted, and the other group purposefully ate 30% less. The group that ate 30% less had a lower incidence of cancer, heart disease, diabetes. Their skin looked younger, and their hair was better. Calorie restriction is one of the only strategies that has been associated with longevity. Now, I just think you should be smart with your calories. There's some people that are calorie rich, which means they can pretty much eat anything they want and they're not going to gain weight because of their metabolism. There are other people that are calorie poor, like I am calorie poor. My genes say I should be fat, so I had a genetic test from 23andMe. So I had a 67% chance of being obese. I have a brother that's obese. I have a sister that's obese, but I'm not. Why? Because I really pay attention to the number of calories I consume, but also the kind of calories I consume. There's actually an article of a guy that went on a Twinkie diet. So he only ate Twinkies, but he ate 1,200 calories a day, and he lost weight. But do you think that's going to serve his health? Of course not. Calorie restriction is the most studied way to extend life. It works by controlling these processes: inflammation, which is a major cause of aging and disease, glucose control, glycation, which is the bonding of sugar to proteins, oxidative stress. It helps the methylation detoxification pathways in your body, and it helps DNA repair. And so I did this big project we'll talk about later at Saddleback Church, where we helped this very large church get healthy. And then I watched what they were feeding the homeless. And I'm like, oh no, we're making the homeless sick. That it's almost better not to feed them anything than to feed them bad food. Here in Orange County, we have the Orange County Rescue Mission, and I am so excited about what they feed the homeless people that live there. I mean, they really focus on eating them in healthy ways. So I want you to go for high quality calories, and I want you to do it with your children. This is just critical. If you model the behavior and then you teach the kids, you actually have them make food with you. So this is my wife and daughter. They are always in the kitchen together. That's how you transfer it to the next generation. There's this very important idea called epigenetics, which means your genes are turned on or turned off by the habits that you engage in. So when they first sequenced the human genome, they thought there were going to be a lot more genes than there really were. Or it turned out to be like 25,000 genes as opposed to 100,000 genes. And they went, well, how is that possible? And what they began to realize, it's not the number of genes, it's what genes get turned on or turned off. And it turns out that your behavior turns on or off certain genes that make illnesses more or less likely in you, in also your offspring. So your habits actually make illness more or less likely in your children and even your grandchildren. So transferring it, if a mother and father eat badly, even before they're pregnant, they significantly increase the risk that their children will be sick. It's disturbing when you really think about it. I think people sort of need to have a sense of how many calories they can eat a day without gaining weight. And I like my overweight patients to keep a calorie log for about 2 months. Why? Just so they get it in their head and weigh and measure things. I mean, like actually get a scale and get measuring cups at home, because most people go, oh, well, I only eat 1,000 calories a day, but when they really measure it, it's more like 2,500. I remember the big epiphany for me came with grape nuts. I'm like, look on the box, grape nuts, it's 220 calories a serving. I like them. So I'd find a bowl, whatever bowl I sort of felt like having, poured the grape nuts in the bowl, and then put milk in it and go, oh, well, milk's like 80 calories a serving, so that's 300 calories. And then I read the fine print that said it's 220 calories for half a cup, and I got a half a cup measuring cup out, put it in the bowl, and I almost started to cry because I was realizing I was probably having 600 or 700 calories. And if you don't weigh and measure things, you don't get this aha that calories really do matter. The recent healthcare law mandated calories on the menu. I was like so excited because you shouldn't be eating things you don't know what they cost, right? I mean, there's a monetary cost to it, but there's also a physical cost to what you're eating. I mean, if you get the calorie menu at a place like Cheesecake Factory, I mean, some of the calorie counts will just stun you. And it's important to always ask, well, how many servings? Because you'll look on, a box of something and you go, oh, it's only 100 calories per serving, but then you realize there's 16 servings in that box. So the average 50-year-old man needs about 2,200 calories a day. So that's someone who's 5'10", someone like me who's 5'6", like that drops down to about 1,900 calories a day. The average 50-year-old woman needs about 1,800 calories a day. If you want to lose a pound a week, 500 calories a day less than what you need. So the average 50-year-old man, it would be 1,700 calories. The average 50-year-old woman would need about 1,300 calories. You got to eat enough, because if you don't eat enough, as we'll see, you'll never get your cravings under control. And you won't keep your blood sugar stable. So the first principle is calories count, but it's not any calorie. Obviously, if you eat a 700-calorie Cinnabon, it's not quite the same as having 700 calories from wild salmon and avocado and an amazing salad. Second principle is you got to drink water. That's actually why I made Brain Boost on the Go that we talk about. And don't drink your calories. I think, what was it, on average in 1984, Americans drank 225 calories a day. In 2012, on average, Americans drank 450 calories a day. That extra 225 calories a day puts 23 pounds of fat a year on your body. So it's like, no wonder everybody's always on a diet. So I'm very purposeful in not drinking my calories unless I start the day with a shake. I often start the day with about a 300-calorie shake that's just loaded with vegetables and high-quality protein. But stay away from sodas and energy drinks and a lot of alcoholic drinks are like 500, 600, 700 calories. And, Starbucks just desperately fought the idea of putting calories on the menu. Because if you look at some of their drinks, some of them are 600 calories. It's like, you're really going to get a quarter of your calories or a third of your calories from one breakfast dessert drink. So your brain is 80% water. So you want to stay away from anything that dehydrates you, much caffeine, much alcohol. Alcohol actually decreases the production of antidiuretic hormone, so it increases urination. Anybody who drinks knows that's true. Hard liquor is worse than beer because it's more concentrated. Obviously, if you're throwing up after you drink too much, that would be a problem. And diuretics, we showed that scan before of Bill Phillips, the bodybuilder, who when he dehydrated himself, the blood flow to his brain significantly went down. So here's that scan again where you can see dehydration on the left, and when he hydrated, his brain looks so much better. When people are dehydrated, when they haven't drank enough, they often mistake the feeling of thirst for hunger and go get food, when it's often better if you just get a big glass of water. And if you're like me and you don't really like water that much, that's where something like Brain Boost on the go can be really helpful. I love this advertisement, really a public service announcement from New York City under Mayor Bloomberg. They really were very forward-thinking society, despite the haters that came out. I was just a huge fan. So I'm on subway in New York one day and I see this sign, "Are you pouring on the pounds?" And you see it's a soda that's pouring into a glass. And as the soda is pouring in, it turns into fat. And it says, "Are you pouring on the pounds? Don't drink yourself fat." Cut back on soda. I would just go eliminate it. There's absolutely nothing good in it. And other sugary beverages, go with water, seltzer, and low-fat milk. You know, personally, I'd probably kill the milk, go with almond milk or coconut milk. I'm not a fan of milk. It's loaded with antibiotics and hormones. I mean, unless you can really get organically raised milk, I'm just not a fan. Plus, a lot of people are really sensitive. Milk in your stomach, so you know the protein casing in milk, when it interacts with hydrochloric acid in your stomach, turns into something called casomorphins, which actually work on the morphine centers of your brain, which is one of the reasons people can crave cheese. Wheat does the same thing. So when gluten goes into your stomach and combines with hydrochloric acid, it can change into something called gluteomorphins, which also can work on the morphine centers of your brain. They talk about this both in wheat belly and grain brain. And when we get people off bread, initially it's such a foreign concept to them that they're like, okay, I'll go off it for 3 weeks, but what's sort of the day, hour, minute I can go back on it? I mean, it's amazing. So high quality calories, lots of water. And when you think about water, think about drinking half your weight in ounces. So if I weigh 150 pounds, I should have 75, 80 ounces a day. If you're 200 pounds, about 100 ounces a day. Now, if you're over 250 pounds, it doesn't quite work because if you're like 600 pounds, you really don't want 300 ounces a day. It'll upset your electrolytes. But, you know, I think under 250 pounds, it's a good rule of thumb. The next principle is high quality protein. Why? Protein stabilizes your blood sugar. So my wife Tana says you should have protein at every meal. You should really think of it like medicine. You want to make it clean. It's one of the big problems with fast food restaurants is their protein's often not clean. Hormone-free, antibiotic-free, free-range, grass-fed. Why do farmers feed their pigs and their cattle grains? To make them fat faster. I was at Mount Vernon. So we have a clinic in Washington, D.C., and I was there, but I had my wife and daughter, so we went to George Washington's place. And so this was in 1780s. They're showing what a working plantation would be like, and there's a sign on how they made the sheep and the pigs fat, and they fed them corn and grains. And so this is not new. I mean, we've known this for a very long time. And so, but what's one of the primary staples of the Western diet? It's grains. And so I like grass-fed. Grass-fed is also associated with higher omega-3 fatty acids. So I really like fish. and lamb for omega-3s. Turkey and chicken, beans, raw nuts. See, the problem often with nuts is they load them up with salt and with oils that you don't need. And vegetables have protein. Broccoli and spinach are actually very high in protein. So protein provides the building blocks for your neurotransmitters, and then smart carbs. So what do I mean by that? Low glycemic, high fiber carbs. So these are carbs that do not raise your blood sugar. So you know the glycemic index. It's basically how quickly does this food turn to sugar in my body? And if they compare it against sugar, that white bread, even wheat bread, turns to sugar in your mouth. Your mouth produces an enzyme, your saliva produces an enzyme called amylase that breaks down carbohydrates into sugar. And if you chew bread long enough, it begins to turn sweet. So high glycemic carbs, white potatoes, rice, bread, pasta. When you look at a plate of pasta, you really should be just thinking of a bowl of sugar. And for me, it's totally true. I remember if I'm like, okay, so here's a plate of spaghetti, and I can eat one plate. It's 500 calories. When I'm halfway through the first plate, I'm beginning to think about the second plate. It's like, why is that? Because your blood sugar raises, your pancreas sees it, boom, it'll start dropping it. And it becomes almost a comfort craving food for you. So you want to think of low glycemic, high fiber foods. It's another reason not to eat fast food. Because what do fast food companies do? Is they take the fiber out of food. Why? Because you can chew it faster. And you're out of the restaurant faster. If you actually look on the ingredient list, so go online to your favorite fast food restaurant, they put ingredients in it to pre-digest the food, because then you can eat it faster. So they actually put orange juice or ascorbic acid in food because it pre-chews it for you. It's sort of disturbing when you think about it. And they take the fiber out. So foods that are high in fiber, vegetables, fruits, especially blueberries and apples. There's some high glycemic fruits that probably are best stayed away from, like dates. Not much pineapple. Pineapple's really high. Watermelon is really high. Why fiber? Why is fiber important? Because fiber decreases ghrelin. Ghrelin's the hormone that makes you want to eat. You feel full faster and longer. It slows absorption so you can absorb your nutrients. Reduces bad cholesterol. Keeps your digestive tract moving. Reduces high blood pressure. Reduces your risk of cancer. So you want to think about 25 to 35 grams a day. We talked about Brain and Love, our brain healthy chocolate bar. It has inulin in it. One of the things I love about that chocolate bar, it's calorie smart, it's only 140 calories, there's no sugar, no dairy, and it has 9 grams of fiber. Now, it doesn't mean you should have 4 of them or 5 of them a day. 1 of them a day is plenty. When we think about sugar, I want you to just think about how it's everywhere and how we celebrate life with things that are not good for us. When I turned 50, 2 different people brought me cakes, and I looked at them like, you don't want me to be 52? But it's the mindset. So we celebrate with sugar, we soothe people with sugar. It just seems like it's a rite of passage. On average, Americans eat about 150 pounds of sugar a year, and it's in everything. In one health bar, so I'm in Hawaii on vacation with my children, and my older son takes a health food bar and throws it into the basket. And I'm like, come here. I'm like, let's look at the ingredients. And had all these different ingredients in it. You know, sweetheart, they mislabeled this bar. It's really an early death bar, but they just thought that wouldn't sell. And so if you look at all the different names for sugar, molasses, caramel color, barley malt, corn syrup solids, high fructose corn syrup, honey, sorbitol, fructose, cane juice crystals, maltose, fruit juice concentrate, maltodextrin. And you know, one of the baddest actors in this group is fructose, which is fruit sugar. But when you unwrap fruit sugar from its fiber source, it actually turns toxic in your body and can be a major cause of fatty liver. There's a wonderful YouTube video you should watch called Sugar, the Bitter Truth. It was a lecture by a pediatric endocrinologist, Robert Lustig, from UC San Francisco. If you watch it, you'll never drink fruit juice again. He is totally, I mean, he's not a fan of soda, obviously, but he thinks parents get it all wrong, that we are thinking we're good parents if we can get kids to drink fruit juice in the morning. I used to think that. I would buy cases of the fruit juice that put in my kids' lunch boxes. And now I'm thinking, that's really a dumb idea. Give them a little water. Sugar is not your friend. Refined sugar is 99.4 to 0.7% pure calories. It doesn't have any vitamins, minerals, or proteins. It's just carbohydrates. It's void of minerals needed for enzymes, can cause a chromium and copper deficiency. It interferes with calcium and magnesium. It increases inflammation, which is probably the major reason to stay away from it. It increases erratic brain cell firing and has been implicated in aggression. It's been associated with ADHD and hyperactivity. It increases triglycerides, lowers HDL, raises LDL, feeds cancer cells. So actually people, when they have cancer, they're putting them on a ketogenic diet, which has been found to help some kinds of cancer. Increases slow brain waves, increases depression, and it makes you dumb. It actually alters learning and memory. That was a study done at UCLA giving rats a high sugar diet. But they were actually able to ameliorate the high sugar diet when they gave them omega-3 fatty acids. Hidden sugars, they're just everywhere. Alcoholic beverages, almost half the calories in ketchup, most luncheon meats, breading on many products, most store-bought bread. So I challenge you, go to the store, go to the bread aisle, and look at the ingredients. So it's one of the things I hammer in my kids, which is whenever we go shopping together, it's like, let's just educate ourselves. And I tried to find one loaf of bread that did not have sugar in it. And out of about 50 brands at this large grocery store I went to, there was one. Oro wheat Russian rye bread had no sugar in it, but everything else did. And it's like, why do you need sugar in bread, especially if you already have amylase that's going to turn it into sugar in your mouth? And purposefully make this stuff so that you crave it. Food companies actually hire scientists, flavorists, to get to what's called the bliss point for foods because they want you to come back to them. The famous commercial for Lay's potato chips. Bet you can't just eat one. I mean, they know what they're doing. Salad dressings frequently contain sugar, which is why when I go to a restaurant, I always get the dressing on the side. Always get the dressing on the side. Why am I going to let somebody in the back who doesn't care about my health put the dressing on the salad? And I usually get oil and vinegar. And a tip is put the vinegar on first, because vinegar has virtually no calories. And then you'll just put a little bit of oil on. If you put the oil on first, you put like 3 times the amount of oil on. And I like olive oil. Olive oil is healthy. Don't cook with it. But it's healthy. Sugar is often added to hamburgers because it prevents shrinkage. And in fast food, grilled chicken. So I'm on McDonald's website. I'm like, well, what's in the grilled chicken? And I'm hoping it's just chicken. And it's not just chicken. It's so irritating. But it includes sugar. And I'm like, why is sugar in my chicken? It's very upsetting. So here are the top 20 carbohydrates in the US, according to the Harvard Nurses Health Study. And there's only one of them that's healthy for you. So from white potatoes, they're number one, to white bread, breakfast cereal, and all I have to do is say, read the ingredients for breakfast cereal. It'll horrify you. Some of the breakfast cereals have 30 ingredients. And if you can't pronounce it, or your grandmother wouldn't have recognized it as food, probably better to stay away from it. Dark bread, orange juice, banana. Now, bananas, it's a double-edged sword. Quickly turns to sugar. High glycemic if it is ripe. Medium glycemic if it's a little green. So if I'm traveling and I'm hungry and I don't know, I go to Starbucks or something, they have bananas, I always go for the green one. White rice, very high glycemic. Pizza, so it's bread and dairy at the same time, or wheat and dairy at the same time. Pasta, muffins, cookies, other fruit juices, Coke. And there's apple, number 14. Skim milk, pancakes, table sugar. Look at, these are the top 20. No wonder our obesity epidemic has exploded. Hypoglycemia. You eat a carbohydrate load, your pancreas sees it, produces insulin, and it drops your blood sugar below what's healthy. It's present in violent offenders and in arsonists. There are a number of studies with that. Alcoholic impulsive offenders with intermittent explosive disorder had low serotonin in the cerebral spinal fluid, but also low blood sugar after a glucose challenge. People make bad decisions when blood sugar goes low. This is going to be a theme we're going to talk about with self-control. There's a wonderful book called Willpower. They talk about people relapse from addictions, whether it's smoking or drug addictions or alcohol addictions, when their blood sugar drops. So if you've not eaten for a while, or you had a carbohydrate load, you are more risk for relapse. But isn't it interesting that you go to 99 drug treatment programs out of 100, they feed you like crap. They're not thinking about your diet one bit, in my experience. And food can help prevent relapse, or it can increase your chances of relapse. So if we look at the symptoms of hypoglycemia, according to a big medical textbook, from feeling tired, mental confusion, inability to focus, impaired memory, dizzy, lightheaded, nervous, depressed, irritable, blurred vision, panic attacks, palpitations, shaky hands. If you look at all of these, it's like, oh my goodness, you can see ADD in here, you can see depression in here, you can see anxiety disorders in here, and what do we feed kids in the morning now? So when I was growing up, it was bacon and eggs and toast. But it was loaded with protein. And now it's sugar cereals, it's Pop-Tarts, it's donuts, it's waffles, it's pancakes with liquid sugar. It's things that are fast, that you can get out of the house quickly. Because when I was growing up, it's fairly rare to have two-parent working families, and now it is very common. So packaged foods to get out of the house quickly are common. Keith Connors did a study with ADD kids and found if they had protein in the morning, their medications lasted longer throughout the day. So here's information from my friend Robert Lustig at UC San Francisco. He basically says kill most sugar, that it's addictive. It's the primary cause of obesity, hypertension, heart disease, cholesterol problems, and diabetes. All of these things damage the brain. He said Americans eat 141 pounds of sugar a year, so it's somewhere 140 to 160 pounds a year, and that fructose, so fruit sugar, is processed in the liver like alcohol. And on the video, the YouTube video, Sugar, the Bitter Truth, which has like 5 million hits now, he goes through the science of it and is very compelling. and he walks you through the process of why it is associated with hypertension and heart disease, cholesterol, and diabetes. There are sugar substitutes. So for those people who have a sweet tooth like me, what do you do? My grandfather was a candy maker. So I grew up with sugar. And giving it up initially was sort of emotionally hard because I was named after my grandfather. He was my best friend growing up. My best memories are standing at the stove making fudge and pralines and so on. So there's aspartame, sucralose, honey, saccharin, stevia, and things called sugar alcohols. So I'm not a fan of aspartame. Aspartame is phenylalanine plus aspartic acid. People who have PKU can't use it. It's destroyed by heat. It's 200 times sweeter than sugar. It's been associated with a lot of side effects. On Joe Mercola's website, he's talked a lot about aspartame. And he said the FDA actually gets more complaints about aspartame than any of the pharmaceutical medications. It's been associated with disorientation, elevated liver enzymes, arthritis, and that's my story. When I was 35, I had arthritis, especially in my knees and in my hands. In fact, it would be hard for me to get off the floor playing with my children. And then one day in my office, one of my patients said her arthritis went away when she stopped drinking diet soda. And I drank diet soda like it was my best friend. I mean, I would, for lunch, go get a 32-ounce Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi, and I'm thinking, well, it's a diet soda, it's free. Tastes good and it's free, but I had arthritis. And when I listened to her and I went, well, let me stop that. And so I stopped it. And in about 3 weeks, I had no more arthritis. And I went, that's so cool. But I drove through Jack in the Box to get lunch. And this was before I sort of saw the nutrition light. And I was thirsty, so I got a Diet Coke. I'm like, maybe this isn't real. And within 20 minutes, my hands started to hurt. And I've only challenged that twice, but I avoid this stuff like the plague. And it's important to know they put aspartame in a whole bunch of things that they don't put on the label. So for example, if you get a pack of gum now, it's very often in the gum, but they don't put it on the label. What they do is they go, see our website for the ingredients for the gum. I just think reading labels is so important because why would you buy something you don't know what's in it? You really don't know the cost of it. It's been associated with loss of balance, numbness, high blood pressure, ADD, hives, memory loss, headaches, seizures. So I'm not a fan. So then Splenda came out, and I'm like, Splenda tastes better than aspartame. And then I read about it. It started out as a pesticide. Its chemical structure is actually closer to DDT than sugar. They say it's the natural alternative, except it's not natural. It's chemically produced. It's 600 times sweeter than sugar. It starts as a sugar molecule and has 3 of its components removed that are replaced with chloride. Provides no calories because the body doesn't recognize it as food. So it started out as a pesticide. So all I want you to do is an experiment. If you have an ant invasion, go get the little yellow packets and pour them on the ants and see what happens. Now, if you pour sugar on the ants, they don't die. If you pour Splenda on the ants, they die. There was a study, a very controversial study, that showed sucralose or Splenda actually cut gut bacteria by 50% in one study. That just infuriated some people. But if it's true, and I remember there'd be days it's like so sweet, I don't really like, so if I get a cup of coffee, I don't really like the taste that much, so I'll kill it with milk and Splenda. I'd put 4, 5, 6 packets in, which just shows how stupid I am. But now I don't, right? Because as we're going to learn, your gut bacteria, you want to protect the good ones. You don't want to be putting anything in your body that kills them. And so I actually know gardeners who carry boxes of Splenda in their trucks. So if there's an anthill, they pour the Splenda in it to kill them. Honey, now, if we had to order them, honey would be better to me than sugar or NutraSweet or sucralose. Contains small amounts of vitamins and minerals. The glycemic index is about 73, so it's slightly higher than sucrose because sucrose is half fructose and honey is about 40% fructose. Saccharin has been used for over 100 years. Studies are mixed on whether it's a carcinogen. It's 200 times sweeter than sugar. In 2000, it was determined there was a link between bladder cancer in rats, but it was not associated to humans. I just think there are better options. Stevia. I'm a fan of stevia. It's extracted from a leaf. There are no known side effects. It doesn't raise blood sugar or insulin levels. And there's a company, I have no financial interest in the company Sweet Leaf, but they make 9 different flavors of liquid stevia. And my favorite is chocolate. In fact, I take their chocolate stevia with me on the road. And if I'm on a plane, I'll ask for sparkling water and a lime. Then I'll put a few drops of chocolate stevia in it. And then it really is free, right? No calories, tastes great, and I just like it. Or if I'm at a restaurant and my wife has it in her purse, I'll ask for extra lemon, squeeze a couple of lemon slices in it, put a little chocolate flavored stevia, and now I have lemonade, no calories. It's smart. And that's what I want for you. I want you to be making smart decisions and teaching the people you care about to make smart decisions. Xylitol is a naturally occurring sweet compound from fruits and vegetables. Supplements made from fiber of the birch tree may decrease dental caries, so you'll often find it in gum. Decrease buildup of plaques, makes you feel full. 40% less calories than sugar, but not no calories. Sugar alcohols are incompletely absorbed in the intestines, so you don't want to have a lot of it because it can have a laxative effect. And what often happens, people get to sugar alcohols and they think they're free, and so especially maltitol, they sweeten a lot of things with maltitol. And the first 2 times you do it, you won't do it a 3rd time because it'll really upset your stomach. On to healthy fats. Fat does not make you fat. Sugar does. We have demonized fat. Low fat this, low fat that. 60% of the solid weight of your brain is fat. So once you take out the water, so 80% of your brain is water. Take out the water. What's left is really a big blob of fat. You know, guys are always interested in the fat on women, you know, whether it's their hips or their breasts. And I'm like, no, no, no. It's the fat between their ears you really want to know is healthy, whether they're going to drive you crazy or not. Now, of course, you want to get rid of bad fats, so all trans fats, so you have to read the label, and unclean animal fat. But focus on healthy fats, especially omega-3s, salmon, avocados, walnuts, green leafy vegetables. High cholesterol is obviously not good for your brain, but very low cholesterol has been associated with homicide, suicide, and depression. So low cholesterol has been associated with antisocial personality disorder, with violence, suicide, child onset conduct disorder. So in kids, it's very important. A lot of doctors never get a cholesterol level in kids, but I think it's important, especially if they have ADHD or they're autistic. And often what you find is their cholesterol levels are really low. One study from Finland, 250 Finnish offenders were 8 times more likely to die of unnatural causes if they had low cholesterol. So healthy fats, this is a plate of tuna and avocado sauce. Does fish make you smarter? Well, my friend Cyrus Raji, who actually works part-time here at Amen Clinics in our research department, published a study in 2011. He asked people how much fish they ate. 10 years later, they had MRIs and cognitive testing. People who ate baked or grilled fish at least once a week had greater amounts of gray matter in 3 key areas. Their hippocampus, which we talked about, one of the major memory structures in the brain. The posterior cingulate, remember that's the area that first dies in Alzheimer's disease. And the orbital frontal cortex, mood and impulse control. And they perform better on tests and they had 5 times less risk being diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease or mild cognitive impairment. So even if you don't like fish, you should be eating it at least once a week. Now, fried fish had no positive effect. So the filet of fish sandwich, not going to do it. So what are some of the best choices of fish? So this comes from the Monterey Bay Aquarium, seafoodwatch.org. And notice there are some farmed fish on this list. So abalone, Arctic char, barramundi, catfish, clams, mussels, oysters, cod, especially Pacific cod, crab, halibut, Pacific halibut, California spiny lobster, rockfish, sablefish. My favorite is Alaskan wild salmon, especially Copper River salmon, sardines, scallops, shrimp, striped bass, tilapia. So tilapia is a very commonly farmed fish, but they say it's one of the cleanest fish. Rainbow trout, albacore tuna, white sea bass. So here's a list of some good choices of fish. But the fish they don't like, caviar, Chilean sea bass, which is very common in restaurants, Atlantic cod, Pacific cod, king crab that's imported, so not from Alaska, imported mahi-mahi, monkfish, orange roughy, another very common one, Pacific salmon, and Atlantic salmon. So farmed Atlantic salmon, they're totally not fans of, nor are they with canned tuna unless it is troll or pole caught. So it just helps you think about, is this good for me or bad for me? So always remember Chloe's game. Is this good for my brain or bad for it? And then the next principle is eat from the rainbow. So purposefully put foods in your diet of many different colors. Natural foods. The Daniel Plan, it's a book I wrote with Mark Hyman and Pastor Warren. Dr. Hyman always says, if it's grown on a plant, eat it. If it's made in a plant, don't eat it. So antioxidants help keep the brain young and happy, and antioxidant status has actually been associated with depression. So I want you to think of eating green things, red things, orange things, yellow things, purple things. So antioxidants in mental health. Oxidative stress plays a major role in psychiatric disorders, including depression. Reactive oxygen species modulate neurotransmitters like norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine, and glutamate. Depression's associated with lower antioxidants, such as compounds like vitamin E, zinc, and CoQ10. N-acetylcysteine, we talked about N-acetylcysteine, helps depression in randomized placebo-controlled studies. Curcumin has antidepressant activity in animal models, and when you mix curcumin with vitamin D, it's been shown to decrease beta amyloid plaques, thought to be one of the major causes of Alzheimer's disease. So here are some antioxidant-rich foods. Now most people think blueberries, okay? They should be organic, but watch, blueberries is not really high on this list. Cloves are huge. Oregano, so now we're in the spice aisle. Oregano is massive. So the ORAC value is the oxygen radical absorbent capacity. So how much of an antioxidant is it really? Rosemary. Okay, we're totally on the spice aisle. And these make foods taste amazing. Tana has an amazing rosemary chicken. Thyme, cinnamon. And cinnamon makes things taste great, and it helps you focus, and it stabilizes your blood sugar, and is a natural aphrodisiac for men. Turmeric, sage has A-level scientific evidence to help your memory. Acai berry fruit, it's really high. Parsley, cocoa powder. It's one of the reasons we make Brain and Love and Brain on Joy. Raspberries, walnuts. So I always like walnuts because they look like a brain. They're high in omega-3 fatty acids and antioxidants. Blueberries, artichokes, cranberries. Now, the cranberries, these are not cranberries filled with sugar, right? It's a little mythology that we can take fruit, dry it, soak it in sugar, and then we're thinking of it as a health food. Oh, it has candied walnuts and dried sugar cranberries on the salad. Oh, that's good for me. It's like, no, no, no. You have to tell yourself the truth. That's terrible for you. Kidney beans, blackberries, and pomegranates. So think of the tasty things you can make with these that are serving your health rather than stealing from your health. You want to eat from the rainbow. And then, and this segues very nicely, principle number 7 is cook with brain-healthy herbs and spices. So garlic and oregano boost blood flow to the brain. Saffron, as we've already talked about, has antidepressant effects. Curcumin decreases beta-amyloid plaques, especially in the presence of vitamin D. Rosemary, thyme, sage enhance memory. Cinnamon boosts attention. And ginger, cayenne, black pepper, and hot, spicy things from gingerols, capsaicin, and piperine, compounds that boost metabolism and have an aphrodisiac effect. Principle number 8 is make sure the food is clean. You want to avoid toxic foods as much as possible, including artificial colors and this thing called sodium benzoate, which is used as a preservative in a lot of things, has been shown to increase ADHD symptoms. There's a meta-analysis of 15 double-blind clinical trials that evaluated artificial food coloring in children already considered to be hyperactive and showed an increase in hyperactive behavior. So what are the foods you should buy organic? Because I know one of the questions people have is organic is more expensive. Well, anything more high quality is more expensive. The question is, do you want to eat high quality food or do you want to eat low quality food? But I understand there's some things to just buy organic or not buy at all. And it's celery and peaches, strawberries, apples, blueberries, nectarines, cucumbers, sweet bell peppers, spinach, cherries, collard greens, and kale. So people think of kale as like the most amazing vegetable, and it is, but get it organic or grow it yourself. Potatoes, grapes, green beans. Now, there are some foods you really don't have to buy organic because they have very low levels of pesticide residue, like onions, and avocados because they have a thick skin. Sweet corn, although corn is very high in omega-6 fatty acids, so I'm not a big fan. Pineapples, because they have a thick skin. Mangoes, thick skin. Asparagus, sweet peas, kiwi fruit, again, the skin. Bananas, the skin. Cabbage, broccoli, papaya, mushrooms, watermelon, grapefruit, think of the skins, eggplant, and cantaloupe. Cantaloupe has fairly low glycemic index. You want to check out food allergies. Gluten sensitivity can cause lower overall perfusion in the brain and has been associated with schizophrenic symptoms. There are a number of case reports, a drastic reduction, if not full remission of schizophrenic symptoms after the initiation of gluten withdrawal has been noted in a subset of schizophrenic patients. One study I read, it was about 4% of schizophrenic patients. So is it worth it, if you have a schizophrenic patient, to put them on an elimination diet? I would argue yes, even 4%, that is just such a devastating disorder. It improves ADHD symptoms in a subset of patients. It's been associated with cerebellar abnormalities, associated with 50% of idiopathic sporadic ataxia, and has also been associated with intractable seizures and hippocampal atrophy. Schizophrenia has been associated with GI inflammation, so immune factors across the gut barrier and implicated in brain disorders. GI inflammations associated with schizophrenia, milk, gluten, exorphins, so that's a new term for many, but it's how the proteins from milk and gluten combine with hydrochloric acid, produce these compounds called exorphins, which work on the opiate receptors in your brain. Ig antibodies to something called Saccharomyces cerevisiae. It's a marker in intestinal inflammation, has been shown to be higher in schizophrenia. So one study, 264 schizophrenics versus 207 non-psychiatric controls. The ASCA markers were significantly elevated in patients. Anti-food antigen antibodies correlated to antibodies against Toxoplasmosis gondii, particularly in males in recent onset schizophrenia. So I just want you to be thinking, it's one of the things scans taught us. So there's often toxicity, then you have to figure out why. Here's a case of a 33-year-old schizophrenic patient. They had diarrhea and weight loss. SPECT showed hypoperfusion to the left front part of the brain. Gluten sensitivity was diagnosed. On a gluten-free diet, eliminated her symptoms. I have to tell you, the best testimonials we get are with Erica, who's our director of nutrition, putting people on elimination diets. It's just something to think about. But bread is my crack. Gluten and addiction. Gluten and casein exposed to pepsin and hydrochloric acid degrade to polypeptides, these things called exorphins that cross the blood-brain barrier. They bind to endorphin receptors and produce a mild euphoria. That is blocked by naltrexone. And people, when they stop bread and they stop dairy, often will have withdrawal symptoms for a few days. Isn't that interesting? So here is someone who's very sensitive to gluten, who's also emotional, temperamental, and when she got rid of the gluten, not only did she lose 35 pounds, she became emotionally much more stable. So we did this study. We had a patient from Minnesota who came to one of our clinics, and he was having marital problems and temper problems. And we scanned him and showed some mild decreased frontal lobe activity. He said, "But doc, I want you to scan me on MSG." And I'm like, "Why?" He said, "Whenever I get MSG, I get violent." I'm like, "Really?" And so I called the doctor that referred to him. I'm like, "Is this okay with you if we do this?" And he's like, "Yeah, I could lose his marriage." And so we scanned him on MSG. We had him go get a Chinese meal that had MSG in it, and it deactivated his left temporal lobe, that area we've already talked about implicated in violence. And I'm like, no way. And I looked at him and I went, "Well, it seems real to me, so you have a choice. You can either hold the MSG, or I'll recommend you go on an anti-seizure medicine to stabilize your temporal lobe." Fully thinking he's going to hold the MSG. And he's like, "You have to give me the medicine." And I'm like, "I'm confused. Why wouldn't you just hold the MSG?" He said, "Dr. Amen," he said, "you don't know this. They put MSG in things, and they don't have to put it on the label. The FDA has come out and said they don't have to label it. They can actually label it as natural flavors. It's like, if I have another temper outburst, my wife's divorcing me. Please, give me the medicine." So we put him on an anticonvulsant. And then I started reading about it, and it's totally true. They don't have to label this stuff. And our experience, it can be hurtful to people. So how about using food to heal your mind? What a concept. Elimination diet, found helpful for kids with ADHD. They put a group on the elimination diet. They've done this study twice. One of the studies was actually published in The Lancet. This study was published in the European Child Adolescent Psychiatry Journal. 73% improved on the elimination diet. So this is what they could eat. Vegetables, fruit, rice, lamb, turkey, and pear juice. That was it. 73% had greater than a 50% reduction of their symptoms. Isn't that interesting? It's like the same response as if they'd give them Ritalin. Now, Ritalin is easy. The elimination diet is hard. But you just have to ask yourself, as physicians, my job isn't to tell parents what to do, it's to give them the options. And a lot of parents choose, well, let's try the diet. The ketogenic diet, so that's basically getting rid of most of the carbohydrates in your diet, has been helpful for many children and adults with different types of seizures, including infantile spasms, myoclonic epilepsy, febrile infectious epilepsy, 2/3 seizure reduction within 6 months, according to one study. It's also now being studied for Alzheimer's disease, ALS, and autism. This is Emmy. We talked about Emmy before. She is 2 years seizure-free. The Mediterranean diet has been associated with lower levels of depression and dementia. This is not a pasta diet, though. When you think of the Mediterranean diet, you want to think of vegetables, fish, salads, olive oil. A lot of people think Mediterranean, they think of the local Italian restaurant. It's like, no, it's not like that. Healthy diets associated with lower risk of depression, diet, physical activity associated with lower risk of dementia. Food is medicine or it's poison. So Tana and I planted a brain health program, including nutrition, into Beacon House, which is one of the oldest drug treatment programs in the West. And it's in Monterey, California. And so Tana and I, after we were done teaching, we went to 17 Mile Drive and we took a hike. And while we were on the hike, I came across this sign. So I took a picture of it. And it says, "Please don't feed the animals. Bread and snacks are unhealthy for squirrel, deer, and birds. Handouts can lead to malnutrition and starvation. These animals need their natural diets. Let them find their own food." And I just thought it was so ironic that we'd just given a lecture today to help feed addicts appropriately so that they could heal, but we sort of don't take our own advice. We're nicer to the animals than we are to people. I got hired by the Yakima Indian Nation up in eastern Washington state. There's a very high incidence of depression, alcohol abuse, suicide, and obesity, diabetes, hypertension, metabolic syndrome. And as I watched what they fed the tribe, I was just horrified. And my conclusion was they were still letting the white man kill them with the high subsidies of sugar, corn, flour. And the really disturbing thing for me was Indians were not fat before they started to eat the Western diet. When they ate their natural diet, they were very healthy people. But the two crops on the Yakima Indian Reservation, they're just odd when you think about their problems. It was wine grapes, and they have problems with alcohol abuse, and hops for beer. So you just have to sort of think about the irony of it. Food is medicine. There are powerful anti-inflammatory chemicals in a lot of foods. Sulforaphanes from broccoli, curcumin from curry, carnosol and rosemary, garlic, green tea, kahewal, and some forms of coffee. My wife really likes that. So coffee isn't the enemy, the caffeine, so you have to be careful with it. It's often the crap you put in coffee that's the problem, whether it's the dairy that has hormones and antibiotics, the sugar, or the artificial sweeteners. But if you start the morning with coffee and a little unsweetened almond milk and a little bit of stevia, it tastes great and it's all good for you. Pomegranate. And then there are superfoods, maca, cacao, goji berries, that are really loaded with phytochemicals. Now, if you want to raise serotonin, we've already talked about some natural ways to do it. Exercise is one. But we'd also talked about smart carbs that increase insulin, because it's the increased insulin that gets tryptophan across the blood-brain barrier. So carbohydrate-rich foods will do it, but they're also pro-inflammatory, so you have to be careful with them. Supplements like 5-HTP, inositol, saffron, St. John's wort. So remember, serotonin involved in mood stability, sleep regulation, appetite, social engagement. It's the don't worry, be happy chemical. In fact, when I first prescribed Prozac, one of the things I really noticed, it demotivated people. It's like everything's fine. I remember I put it on a general manager of someone who owned 3 radio stations, and he came back 3 weeks later, he says, "I'm feeling so much better, but you have to put me on something else because I don't care and I'm not doing my paperwork." So don't worry, be happy may not always be good. But what are the foods that increase serotonin? So they're dumb carbs and smart carbs. The troubled carbs, things like crackers, pancakes, sweet cereals, muffins. And notice, people can crave those foods on the left. The smart ones, sweet potatoes. Now, I'm still not a big fan of brown rice, but it's not just glycemic index that matters. It's something called glycemic load. So glycemic load are all the foods put together in a meal. And so if you have a fifth of the meal as brown rice, it's not nearly as bad as if you had 3/4 of the meal as brown rice. Steel-cut oatmeal with berries and stevia, apples, cherries, bell peppers, sweet corn, cantaloupe. Well, what about dopamine? You want to focus? So dopamine, motivation, emotional significance, relevance, focus, get it done. Found in protein-rich foods that decrease insulin. And given the incidence of metabolic syndrome, we really want to keep insulin in check. So supplements to boost dopamine, DL-phenylalanine, tyrosine, SAMe, B-complex, rhodiola, ginkgo, ascorbic acid. And what about the foods? Think proteins, beans, meat, eggs, cheese, nuts, seeds, high protein veggies, protein powders. I'm not a big fan of cheese just because of the issues with dairy. I'm thinking of homework. You know, the kids come home from school. What did I often have? A can of soda and cookies. Good for your concentration or bad for your concentration? Not good. If you had a handful of nuts and an apple, well, that's so much better. Or one of my favorites would be broccoli and avocados, or homemade turkey jerky. If you get a dehydrator, just put a little tiny bit of salt on it. So much better than store-bought jerky that's loaded with sugar. How about acetylcholine? Involved in learning, memory. It's found in liver, eggs, lecithin, milk, salmon, shrimp. Supplements like choline salts, phosphatidylcholine, or lecithin, or GABA. So GABA are the things that calm you. It's an inhibitory neurotransmitter found in grains, bananas, broccoli, nuts, lentils, green tea. One of my favorite supplements is L-theanine. Helps you focus and relaxes you at the same time. Glutamate you have to be careful with. I don't know if you've heard this term, excitotoxin, but aspartame is an excitotoxin, but so are gluten. So you have to be careful. You need some glutamate in order to focus, but you have to be careful with it. Found in diet sodas, dairy, soy, wheat, barley, nuts, and some meats. This next section is so important, and a lot of people don't know about it. Your gut is often called the second brain. It's loaded with nervous tissue. It's in direct communication with your big brain, which is why we get butterflies when we get excited or loose bowels when we're upset. Anxiety, stress, depression, and grief all express themselves with emotional pain, which is your brain, but also quite often in gastrointestinal distress. The gut has a single epithelial layer, so single cell layer like the brain, and the gut is the largest mucosal surface in the body. It's the interface between the external world and you. It involves the initial metabolism and transformation of food. It provides a structural defense, and there's trouble when your gut begins to break down. So you've heard this term, perhaps leaky gut syndrome. It's when this epithelial layer begins to become inflamed and troubled. So the lining of your gut provides a layer of protection to the endothelium. It's made up of glycoproteins, mucin. Mucin production is upregulated by probiotics. That's why I take a probiotic every day. And this layer can be compromised by stress, drug use, diet, environmental chemicals, gut flora imbalance, and a genetic predisposition. And your gut supports brain health. Your gut has 100 trillion microorganisms bacteria, yeast, and other things. It's got 10 times the number of cells than are in your human body. So 100 trillion microorganisms in your gut. 60% of your stool is made up of these organisms. Sort of gross when you think about it. So to be healthy, you want the relationship of good bugs to bad bugs to be lopsided in the positive direction. So you want to think about 85% good bugs, 15% bad bugs. When it gets out of balance, you get sick, but not just your stomach, your mind gets sick. So gut health, friendly bacteria deter the troublemakers, such as E. coli, and they help us withstand stress. If your good bacteria is deficient, like from a poor diet that feeds yeast overgrowth, think sugar. It's often why people crave sugar, or the excess use of antibiotics. So many of the patients we see at Amen clinics, they had a lot of ear infections as kids. They're on multiple rounds of antibiotics. Multiple rounds of antibiotics often kill both good and bad bugs, but they upset the balance, and that can affect you for the rest of your life. People are more likely to feel stressed, and ADD, autism, depression, mental fogginess have all been connected to intestinal bacteria imbalances. So let's talk about gut bugs, gut flora. So they inhabit the small and large intestines. Anaerobic bacteria are the most abundant. Probiotic, beneficial bacteria that serve many functions of the gut. Yeast, Candida albicans, are also part of normal flora, but they need to be kept under control by good bacteria. So what's the function of beneficial flora? Makes vitamin K and biotin, helps with digestion, is involved with detoxification. Probiotics have been found to decrease colon cancer risk. They're the carriers for bad estrogen out of the body. So that's really important because bad estrogens have been associated with cancer. Gut flora is involved in immune modulation. They control the population of pathogens, and good bacteria help with nutrient absorption and metabolism. So they protect you from allergies and food intolerances. They help with hormone regulation. Probiotic organisms help to synthesize butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid that protects the GI lining. Dysbiotic organisms, so think of bad bugs, contribute to the deterioration of the intestinal lining, yeast, bacteria, parasites. Butyrate protects the cells of the intestine from abnormal growth and can help you protect against colon cancer. So what decreases healthy gut bacteria? Medications, such as antibiotics. Oral contraceptives. So now, what percentage of women take oral contraceptives? It's 60 or 70% of women. And isn't it interesting, 23% of women between the ages of 20 and 60 are taking antidepressants. It's interesting. Proton pump inhibitor, which are passed out like candy. You have an upset stomach, so somebody puts you on a proton pump inhibitor. Steroids and NSAIDs, or non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen. Stress decreases healthy gut bacteria. Sugar, it's another reason to eat sugar. Artificial sweeteners, certain allergies, toxins, so bactericidal chemicals in water, pesticides, heavy metals, alcohol, infections like H. pylori, parasites, radiation, chemotherapy, and too much exercise. Food is your greatest danger to gut bacteria. The greatest danger is not from the antibiotics prescribed by your doctor, but rather from the foods you eat. Prevalence of antibiotics found in conventionally raised meats and vegetables have the potential to throw off the balance of good to bad bacteria. 70% of the total antibiotic use in the US goes to livestock. Just think about that. It's why we talk about hormone-free, antibiotic-free, free-range grass-fed. So it's critical to focus on eating antibiotic-free, hormone-free, grass-fed, free-range meats. Now, a few germs can be good for you. Those parents that are so upset about germs with their kids are always putting antibiotic lotion on their kids' hands, probably not a good idea. Animals raised in germ-free environments show exaggerated response to psychological stress. So you need good bugs to boost your immune system. Don't keep kids away from the dirt. When researchers gave animals probiotics, stress levels normalized. Stress all by itself decreases healthy gut flora. If your gut flora is deficient early in life, it can cause a decrease in serotonin, maybe for the rest of a person's life. At least that's what they found in animal models. Early abandonment issues can cause increased stress, decrease healthy bacteria, and increase gut permeability. So when young rats were separated from their mothers, cells that lined the gut became more permeable, think leaky gut, allowing bacteria from the intestine to pass through the bowel walls and stimulate immune cells to start attacking other organisms. And this is a quote from the research. In rats, it's an adaptive response. If born into a stressful, hostile environment, nature programs them to be vigilant and stress responsive in future life. Up to 70% of patients treated for chronic gut disorders experience early childhood trauma, like parents' divorce, chronic illness, or parents' death. What happens early in life, along with an individual's genetic background, programs how a person will respond to stress for the rest of his or her life. It's scary when you think about it, but it really begins to make you think about this gut-brain connection. So here's a case. T grew up in a single-parent home filled with stress. At age 4, her uncle was murdered. Then, mom started bringing her to the doctor for GI complaints. And what's the simple answer for a lot of doctors? Put the kids on antibiotics. Gets them out of the office quickly. At age 9, she started having panic attacks, especially when her mother came home late from work. As a teenager, developed bulimia with a lot of bad intestinal issues. Probiotics and stress reduction were really helpful for her physically and emotionally. So what about chronic fatigue, gut, and your brain? So Rao did a study of 39 chronic fatigue patients, gave them 3 doses of probiotics a day or a placebo for 2 months. 73% of the probiotic group had increased good bacteria, which corresponded with significant decreased anxiety. There's no change at all in the placebo group. Researchers believe the probiotics crowded out more toxic gut bacteria linked to depression. The subjects felt less anxious, calmer, better able to cope. They slept better and had fewer heart palpitations. So how do you fix someone's gut? It's why at Amen Clinics we have a director of integrative medicine to help us with that. But some of the things are just really simple. Improve their diet. So the diet we talked about, nutrient density in your food, essential fatty acids, fiber, and phytonutrients. So think fruits and vegetables. Eliminate most simple sugars that feed the bad bugs. Support digestion with enzymes. Some people give actually hydrochloric acid. Support normal flora with pre and probiotics. Be careful with antibiotics. And remove any infections or toxins from the gut. Food is medicine, or it's poison. Your gut is the second brain. So I just find it fascinating. You know, as a psychiatrist, I was basically trained to look for symptoms and treat with medication and psychotherapy. And when you really start thinking about integrating all the systems in the body, it forces you to go back to medical school, really. But you get so excited if my blood vessels are right, my brain is right. If my gut is right, my brain is right. If my hormones are right, my brain is right.